to another panel, which is entitled Transport and Shipping. The importance of this is obvious, because remember that they account, transport alone, by 24% of global carbon emissions, and they are growing faster. This is one of the novelties, that it grows when it should decrease, right? So there are many challenges ahead, and for instance, to meet the agreements in Paris, this is a field in which solutions and actions are especially needed.
So the moderator of this second panel on transport is Renato Masoncini, who is an adjunct professor at Politécnica de Milano and the former manager of the Italian railways. And we would like to invite Mr. Masoncini up to the stage, together with the 5 speakers of this panel, who are Anirban Ghosh, José Manuel Basallo, Teresa Parejo, Phoebe Conbury, and Johanna Christensen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody and to my distinguished panelists. I'm very happy because normally when we discuss about mobility, there are only men on the stage. Now we have 3 women, so it's very, very good. Okay. A very few introduction about our panel. On the work we have done with Roadmap 2050, our manual with SDSN and FIM. And so some numbers and some very quick solutions that we funded for the different sectors, so road, railways, aviation, navigation. Some much more complex than others. It's clear that transport sector is the backbone of any productive system, and if you think to the urbanization that will be in the future, all of us knows that the competition, the competitivity between the different cities in the future will depend a lot on the efficiency of mobility inside the cities, so it's very important. And of course, it's very important for the transport sector to have power sector fully decarbonized, no? We discuss a lot about electrical vehicles, if it's better or not on the internal combustion vehicle, because it depends if the energy, the electricity that arrive is produced with the CO2 zero or not. But the effective decarbonization pathways in transport rely mostly on technological solutions, new sustainable fuel development, fuel shift surely, demand reduction and modal shift strategies so behavior that are very important as we see. So this is the picture of a sector, a complete disaster between, yes, between 1973 and 2016, 2.5 times more of oil products used in transportation sector. You can see electricity, very few historical, some railways, some metro, and in the last years some electrical cars. But also biofuel, leader part in the last 10 years. But the reality is that oil products are the real protagonist of this sector. And road transport represents 75% of the total consumption. And is growing a lot also because the population is growing, so the mobility is growing. All people and goods needs to move. So the result is that in this moment, the share of oil products in transport sector is 94% in oil products, approaching 100% in aviation and shipping, and 74% is road, 12% air, and 12% water transport, about. 60% of the carbon of the CO2 is for passengers transport, 40% for freight. In passengers, 10% air and 50% land travel, and 50% of the land travel in urban travel, and is growing. For freight transport, 50% maritime transportation and 25% road and rail traffic. Also, this curve is not necessary to comment. The power sector can reduce of 50% the CO2 emission till 2040, not the same curve for the transportation sector. So, to go quickly deep down in the four different clusters. Automotive. In this moment, there are 5 million of cars with battery, so full electric cars or plug-in hybrid cars in 2018. So 5 million of cars with battery in the world. And last year, 2 million of cars were sold on the market. 2 million on 80 million, this is the situation, so 3% and so on. But the sales are expected to increase to at least 12 million by 2025 or more, 30 million in 2030. I think that all the car makers in this moment are thinking that in 2050 all the light vehicle will be electrical, and in fact they are investing lots of money to the transformation, the shift between through the electrical cars. The problem, the bottleneck, as we know, is our batteries. In this moment, the production of batteries in 2018 is about 200 gigawatt hours. And if we want to arrive to have 80 million of vehicle production every year in electrical vehicles, we need about 4,000 gigawatt hours of production. So lots of gigafactory. About 200 gigafactory, mainly. So lots of investments. And there are a big problem of raw materials, because as you know, to produce batteries, that is very real bottleneck. We have problem of cobalt, nickel, lithium, and so on. So it's interesting to listen from our panelists what about automotive. EV truck, there are some very funny experiment by Tesla or Nikola Motors that are thinking to put on the market vehicles able to reach 800 kilometers of range. In this moment, the big truck from Scania and others have 5,000 kilometers of range, are not necessary, are very useful to pay less the fuel, because you can buy fuel in the countries in which, for example, transferring in Europe, where the cost is lower. But the cost of these electrical trucks are double than the traditional ones, so it's very difficult. So we think in our report that it's very important to improve electrical roads. There are some pilots in Sweden, in Germany. We are working also in Italy to have one in USA. So catenari, very traditional, very historical system to bring energy, electrical energy to a truck. Or induction, there are some companies very interesting that are developing induction system to recharge a vehicle, of course, all kinds of vehicles along the road. So probably a mix of battery and electrical cars, electrical roads can be a solution for every truck. For shipping, the CO2 emissions from shipping are projected to increase between 50% and 250%. without some action. I think, but we have two panelists about these topics, that there are no breakthrough technology currently available. In our roadmap, we talk about light materials, slender design, less friction, for example, using lubrification, chemical coating, and something else. Wind assist, or operational, for example, lower speeds. Ship sides and so on. But probably all these technology or operational topics are able to reduce about 20%, no more. To arrive to CO2 zero, probably is necessary to shift to synthetic fuels or advanced sustainable biofuel. And aviation, the situation of aviation probably is similar to shipping, because it's clear that it is impossible in this moment to imagine a big ship or a plane full electric. So also in this case, surely it's possible to have a new airplane, more efficiency. There is a panelist from Iberia that will tell us what is possible to do with the new plane, but probably also in this case, to arrive to CO2 zero is necessary to shift to synthetic fuels or biofuels and so on, or to shift to train where is possible. And last but not least, mobility as a service. Mobility as a service, guys, is of course a concept. It's very important because it's a new transport concept that integrates existing and new mobility services into one single platform. It's very important because there are some studies, for example, one very interesting from MIT in Boston, that says that it's possible to reduce a lot the number of vehicles satisfying the same demand of transportation with this new platform. For example, in these studies, there was a focus on Manhattan, in which every day there are 275,000 cars moving to move people in Manhattan, and with the simulation with autonomous drive and mobility as a service, MIT demonstrated that it's possible to manage the same demand with 50% of the vehicles. So very important also if it's not a technology to decarbonize, but is a technology to reduce the number of movement. Okay, I close, I say very quick, and I introduce my panelist. Okay, we can start from Iberia. Teresa Parejo Navallas, she's the head of sustainability and social corporate in Iberia since a couple of months, and she has developed really an intensive academic career as an associate professor of administrative law at Carlos III University in Madrid. And she is also a member of the Pascual Madozzi Institute of Spatial Planning, Urbanism and Environment in Spain, and member of the Board of Governors of ICE, the Institutional Council of Environment Law. So please, Teresa, the stage is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this kind invitation. As my colleague said, I am here representing Iberia, the aviation sector. No? So, before I start with this slide, I wanted to remind you, in case you didn't know, that Iberia belongs to a big group called IAG, International Aviation Group, and it also is also a member of the Global Compact, and recently has joined the Spanish Green Growth Group. So Iberia is at this point really committed to the Sustainable Development Goals to achieve the 2030 agenda, but we are we understand that it's a big, big challenge. So, of course, as you know, all the SDGs are interconnected, but the aviation sector, or at least Iberia, is committed mostly to these 7 SDGs. But today we are going to talk about climate action. So, aviation represents about 2.5% of global CO2 emissions, which is not a big chunk of the whole global emissions, but the main problem with the aviation sector, that is 2 things. First, that is going to grow very fast in the next years, and also that there's no substitutive fuel available in the market right now. So we need to we need to be very creative and to be able to achieve these goals. So, as I said, Iberia belongs to IAG, the IAG group, and this group has committed through the Flight Path Net Zero project, has committed to these 3 objectives. For the year 2025, has committed to a 10% reduction in CO2 per passenger kilometer, which is the main way aviation sector measures their sustainability in terms of CO2 emissions. And also in 2030 has pledged for a 20% reduction in net CO2 emissions. And what is most challenging for the sector is the 2050 target, which is net zero, achieving net zero CO2 emissions, which is, you have to understand that this is a very, very big challenge, since the sector in general has committed at this point for 2050 at 50% net zero CO2 emissions. So for us, it's a great, great challenge. So how is the group, and in particular Iberia, how is it going to achieve this very challenging target? So through 2 main things. First of all, and everyone agrees to this, and it's been talked about during this morning, through innovation and new technology measures. And those are linked to, of course, new planes, new aircrafts, digitalization, renewable energy, and waste management. How is this? So, about the renovation of the fleet, the IAG group has committed to buy 142 new planes in 5 years, 20 of which will be owned by Iberia. These are very, very efficient new aircrafts. Mainly the most efficient one is the A350. It's around 25-30% more efficient than the rest of the aircrafts. Of course, not only that, there's more measures. For example, the reduction of paper and weight or on board within the planes. So reduction of on-board weight, and that reduces CO2 emissions. And so all this paper, we have digitalized the magazines, no more paper on board. And also, instead of the pilots, instead of bringing their big bags with a lot of papers on how they need to, that shows the route to where they're going. Instead of that has been substituted by an electronic flight bag, and that has reduced a lot the emissions per flight. Sorry. And also, there's not only on board on the flights, but as you might know, Iberia is also has a handling business and also management business. And so for that, Iberia has also reduced the CO2 emissions with airport equipment, new airport equipment, and also as well has managed, has introduced a very, very innovative waste management on board, classifying waste on board, and which has reduced a lot of CO2 tons of waste. And also, our buildings are 100% renewable, come from renewable resources. But not only new technology or innovation, also efficient procedures, measures linked to the way the pilots fly, the load of the plane or the aircraft, as I said before, the use of fuel efficiencies, and as well the waste management. So the operational efficiencies are very, very important. So the way the pilots decide how to fly the plane, for example, on the runway, the pilots usually use the SETI, which is the single engine taxi in-out, using only one engine through the runway, or the way they approach the runway in descent when they approach the airport. That can save a lot of CO2 emissions, and also the fuel use. Not if the Iberia has decided to use as less as possible the auxiliary power unit, which is an engine situated in the back of the plane, and that uses a lot of fuel. So instead of that, they use this unit that is within the airport and not within the aircraft. And also electronics mechanisms that show them how to elaborate or create the best way for the approaching or the route they are approaching through this app, Nimbus system. Also the adjustment of the flight weight with the use of the fuel, the exact fuel they need, or the water that is going to be consumed within the flight, or reduction of plastic on board with the management that I just told you about, and also in the lounges, the premium lounges, we have reduced a lot of plastic use. That is all I had to say. Of course, I'm open to discussion later on. Thank you very much.